The grand convocation hall of the Cathar Dominion was a cavern of calculated grandeur, hewn from the core of a tamed asteroid. Its crystalline walls, veined with raw, unpolished minerals, absorbed the spectral light of the nebulae swirling in the vast observation portals, casting long, shifting shadows across the assembled delegates. In this chamber, silence was a statement, a carefully wielded tool of political power, and today it was a suffocating shroud. The meticulously balanced atmosphere of nitrogen and noble gases felt heavy, thick with the unspoken dread of an empire facing a crisis it could not comprehend. At the heart of this silent tempest stood High Executor Zarthus, his obsidian carapace seemingly drinking the ambient light, leaving an impression of a void in the shape of a leader. His mandibles, usually still and imperious, betrayed a microscopic tremor, a testament to the strain that gripped the highest echelons of the Dominion. He surveyed the gathered representatives of the allied species, the architects of a civilization that spanned a vast arm of the galaxy and measured its continuity in millennia, and saw not strength, but a collective paralysis born of disbelief. "They do not respond." Zarthus's voice was a low, resonant thrum, a sound that typically silenced all dissent, but now it only seemed to amplify the ambient fear. "To our hails, to our warnings, to our magnanimous offers of tributary status, they simply continue." With a sweep of a multi-jointed limb, he gestured toward the central hollow table. There, a three-dimensional star chart glowed, a tapestry of Dominion territory. Across this map, a small cluster of alien icons crept with an unnerving, inexorable slowness toward the Viridian threshold, a sector of space claimed by the Dominion since the dawn of its interstellar age. The icons were few, a paltry number against the layered fleets of the Cathar and their vassals, yet their advance was marked by a serene, almost insolent, confidence that frayed the composure of every being present. They were an enigma, a ghost in the grand, predictable clockwork of galactic power dynamics. A Hesperian delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering, vaguely humanoid containment field, pulsed with a soft, violet light. It is plausible they are primitives, High Executor. Their FTL signatures are crude, unrefined. They tear at the fabric of spacetime in a manner that suggests a profound ignorance of its fundamental laws. They are likely unaware of the magnitude of the power they are provoking. The Hesperian's voice, a chorus of harmonious chimes that usually induced tranquility, was today tinged with a condescending certainty that Zarthus found profoundly disquieting. It was precisely this underestimation, this ingrained arrogance that had permitted the newcomers, these humans, to advance so far without a single shot being fired. The Dominion had observed them, had painstakingly analyzed the primitive radio waves that still echoed from their distant homeworld, and had passed its judgment. They were a young species, their recorded history a brief, violent flicker in the vast darkness of cosmic time. Their technology was rudimentary, their societal structures a chaotic and fragmented mess. By every metric the Dominion held sacred, they were inferior. And yet these primitives have neutralized the void sentinels at the edge of the Empyrean Nebula, countered a towering Zalosian, his bark-like skin rippling with mossy green patterns that shifted with his agitation. A being of immense patience, a trait common to his long-lived arboreal species, even he was showing signs of profound unease. They did not destroy them. The data is clear. They deactivated them. The sentinels are ancient, a legacy of the progenitors themselves. Their power systems are beyond our comprehension, let alone our ability to manipulate. How could a species that still encases its warriors in crude metal shells possibly achieve such a feat? The question settled in the heavy air, a monument to the growing cognitive dissonance that plagued the convocation. The Void Sentinels were not mere weapons. They were relics, artifacts of a bygone era, their technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. They were the unbreachable guardians of the Dominion's core systems, and the humans had seemingly drifted past them, as if they were nothing more than ceremonial arches. Zarthus's gaze returned to the hollow table. The human icons were so few, so deceptively insignificant. They were a splinter, a minor annoyance that had somehow worked its way under the impenetrable hide of the Dominion. He had reviewed the intelligence assessments 100 times. He had seen the grainy, distorted images of their vessels, clunky, unesthetic contraptions of metal and fire, belching raw radiation into the pristine vacuum. They were brutalist in their design, utterly lacking the elegant, organic curves of Cathar starships, or the crystalline, multifaceted perfection of Hesperian cruisers. They were, in a word, primitive. Yet the data did not lie. The sentinels were inert. The human fleet advanced, undeterred and unopposed. The internal conflict within Zarthus was a raging storm. His instincts, honed by decades of command and countless campaigns, screamed that this was a threat unlike any they had ever faced. But his logic, his deep-seated understanding of the delicate calculus of power in the galaxy, told him that this was an impossibility. A species as young and as technologically unsophisticated as humanity could not possibly pose a genuine threat to the Dominion. To even suggest such a thing would be to invite ridicule, to undermine the very foundation of Cathar supremacy that had been meticulously built over thousands of years. He was trapped between the terrifying evidence of his senses and the comforting, long-held dogma of his civilization. Their psychology is perplexing. A small, rodent-like creature, a scrivener, chirped from its hovering podium. The scriveners were the Dominion's archivists, its historians, its interpreters of alien cultures. They had spent months poring over the captured human broadcasts, attempting to construct a psychological profile of this emergent species. They exhibit a profound capacity for both sublime creation and catastrophic destruction. Their art, their music. It speaks of a deep emotional wellspring, a sensitivity that is almost unnerving. Yet their history is a litany of violence, of self-inflicted wounds. They are a paradox, a species at war with itself. It is possible they do not even comprehend the concept of a unified galactic community. They may see us as just another rival tribe to be conquered or destroyed. This assessment resonated with Zarthus's deepest fears. It was not the humans' technology that he feared, but their unpredictability. The Cathar were a logical, ordered species. They understood strategy, they understood the mathematics of power. But the humans, they seemed to be driven by something else, something primal and chaotic. They were a force of nature, an untamable element in a galaxy that the Dominion had worked for so long to control. He felt a shiver run through his carapace, a sensation he had not experienced since he was a young warrior facing his first blooding. It was the cold, creeping touch of the unknown. The debate in the convocation hall raged on, a symphony of discordant voices and conflicting opinions. Some argued for a swift, overwhelming show of force to crush the humans before they could become a greater threat. Others cautioned restraint, urging a more diplomatic approach, a chance to understand this new species before resorting to violence. The Hesperians, ever the pragmatists, suggested a blockade, a quarantine of the human homeworld to contain their primitive expansion. But Zarthus knew that none of these options were viable. A direct attack would be a declaration of war, a war that the Dominion was not prepared for, not against an enemy they did not understand. A blockade would be a sign of weakness, an admission that they were afraid. And diplomacy, how could they negotiate with a species that refused to even acknowledge their existence? As the hours wore on, the frustration in the chamber grew. The delegates, once so confident in their own superiority, were now consumed by a gnawing uncertainty. The humans had become a mirror, reflecting their own anxieties, their own vulnerabilities. They were a symbol of the vast, terrifying emptiness of the galaxy, a reminder that for all their power and all their knowledge, they were still just a small collection of civilizations clinging to a fragile existence in an indifferent cosmos. The silence that had once been a currency was now a crushing weight, a suffocating blanket of fear and doubt. Zarthus looked at the faces of the delegates, at the shifting colors of their skin, the twitching of their antennae, the trembling of their energy fields, and he saw not the leaders of a mighty empire, but a group of frightened children lost in the dark. And then it happened. A single, clear, resonant tone cut through the cacophony of the chamber. It was a sound that no one in the room had ever heard before, yet it was instantly recognizable as a signal of communication. It was not a Cathar hailing frequency, nor was it the multi-layered psychic broadcast of the Hesperians. It was something else, something human. The hollow table flickered, the icons representing the human fleet coalescing into a single point of brilliant white light. And from that light, a voice emerged, speaking in the lingua franca of the Dominion, a language that had taken the scriveners decades to decipher from the fragmented human broadcasts. The voice was calm, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. "This is Captain Eva Ristova of the United Earth Vessel Odyssey. We have reached the Viridian threshold. We are here to talk." The chamber was plunged into a stunned, absolute silence. The debate, the fear, the uncertainty, it all vanished, replaced by a single overwhelming question. Who were these beings? These primitives who had crossed the void in their crude metal ships, who had silenced the ancient sentinels of the progenitors, who now spoke to them with the calm, unwavering authority of a power that knew its own strength. Zarthus looked at the point of light on the hollow table, and for the first time he felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was a sense of awe, a grudging respect for a species that had defied all their expectations, that had shattered their carefully constructed worldview with a single, simple sentence. The galaxy, he realized, was about to change forever. The image that materialized above the hollow table was not what the convocation had expected. They had anticipated a fierce, barbaric visage, a creature of raw, untamed aggression. Instead, the being that appeared before them was unassuming. A female of the human species, her features soft and symmetrical, her eyes a deep, unfathomable blue. She was clad in a simple, dark blue uniform, adorned with a single silver insignia on the collar. Her hair was pulled back from her face in a severe, practical style. She was not a warrior, not a conqueror. She was a diplomat, a scholar, an explorer. And yet there was a strength in her gaze, a quiet confidence in her posture that seemed to fill the vast emptiness of the chamber. Captain Restova's eyes, rendered in stunning fidelity by the holographic projector, seemed to meet those of every delegate simultaneously. There was no artifice in her expression, no hint of the deceptive emotional displays the Cathar sometimes employed in their own diplomatic endeavors. Her calmness was a tangible force, a stark contrast to the turbulent undercurrents of anxiety that had been rippling through the convocation hall for cycles. Zarthus felt his own internal turmoil momentarily subside, replaced by a profound curiosity. This human was not the savage he had envisioned, not the chaotic force of nature the scriveners had described. She was composed, deliberate. "We have been monitoring your communications for some time," she began, her voice a steady, measured cadence that carried the weight of unspoken history. "We understand your concern, your confusion. We are a young species, it is true. We have much to learn about this galaxy and its inhabitants, but we are not primitives." The last word was not spoken with defiance, not with anger, but with a simple, unadorned statement of fact. It was a correction, not a challenge, and the subtlety of it was not lost on Zarthus. These humans were not just technologically capable, they were masters of nuance, of psychological subtlety. The Hesperian delegate, its energy field flickering with a nervous, yellow light, was the first to break the silence. "Your ships, they are unconventional. Your propulsion systems, they violate the known laws of physics. They damage the very fabric of spacetime. It is a reckless, dangerous way to travel." The chimes of the Hesperian's voice were sharp, accusatory. It was a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of superiority, to find a flaw in this unnervingly composed human. Captain Restova's expression did not change. She simply inclined her head, a gesture that the translation software identified as one of acknowledgement. "Our FTL drives are a necessity. We did not have the luxury of millennia to develop the more elegant solutions that your civilizations possess. We were born on a world that was not always kind to us. We had to learn to be resourceful, to bend the rules of the universe to our will. Our technology is a reflection of our history, of our struggle to survive." There was a hint of something in her voice then, a deep, resonant sadness that seemed to echo across the vast, empty spaces between the stars. It was the sound of a species that had known great suffering and had emerged from it stronger, more determined. Zarthus felt a new, unfamiliar emotion stirring within him. It was not fear, not anger, not even respect. It was empathy. He, a Cathar, a member of a species that prided itself on its cold, dispassionate logic, was feeling a connection to this alien. He saw in her eyes the reflection of his own people's ancient struggles, the long, bloody wars that had forged the Cathar dominion. He saw the same resilience, the same unwavering will to endure. The humans were not so different after all. The Zalosian delegate, his voice a deep, rumbling growl, posed the question that was on everyone's mind. "The Void Sentinels, how did you disable them? They are progenitor technology beyond our comprehension. To even approach them is to risk annihilation." He leaned forward, his massive, tree-like form casting a long shadow over the hollow table. He was a being of immense physical power, but in the face of this small, unassuming human, he seemed almost fragile. Captain Restova's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. It was the first sign of emotion she had displayed, and it was a deeply unsettling one. It was not a smile of triumph, not a smile of arrogance. It was the smile of someone who held a secret that could change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "We did not disable them," she said softly. "We communicated with them. We asked them to stand down." The silence in the chamber was so profound that Zarthus could hear the faint hum of the asteroid's life support systems. He could hear the frantic, panicked thoughts of the other delegates, a chaotic symphony of disbelief and terror. "Communicated with the Sentinels. The idea was preposterous, heretical. The Sentinels were machines, ancient, unthinking automatons. They did not respond to requests. They did not think. "That is impossible," the Scrivener chirped, its small body trembling with agitation. "The Sentinels are not sentient. They are artifacts, relics." "Are they?" Captain Restova's voice was gentle, almost pitying. "We have found that many things in this galaxy are not what they seem. We have learned to look beyond the surface to see the hidden patterns, the deeper truths. The Sentinels are not machines, not in the way you understand the term. They are guardians. They were created to protect this region of space, to preserve the balance of life. But their creators are long gone, and their directives have become corrupted. They have become stagnant, a barrier to progress. We simply reminded them of their original purpose." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Zarthus felt as if the floor of the convocation hall had fallen away, leaving him adrift in a sea of terrifying new possibilities. The humans had not just developed a new form of FTL drive. They had unlocked a new form of consciousness, a new way of understanding the universe. They could communicate with the very fabric of reality, with the ancient, sleeping intelligences that lay hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy. "And what of your dreadnoughts?" Zarthus finally found his voice. He had to know. The title, the moniker that had been whispered in fear and derision among the Dominion's intelligence circles. It was a primitive, brutal term, one that spoke of mindless destruction. He had seen the grainy images of the human ships, their massive, imposing silhouettes, their bristling arrays of weapon emplacements. They were machines of war, there was no doubt about it. Captain Restova's faint smile widened, but there was still no hint of malice in it. "Ah, yes, our dreadnoughts. I believe you are referring to our colony ships." She gestured to the hollow table, and the image of the human fleet reappeared. But this time the icons were not just abstract symbols. They resolved into detailed, three-dimensional models of the human vessels, and Zarthus saw that he had been wrong. They were not warships. They were arcs. The ships were massive, yes, larger than any vessel in the Dominion's fleet, but they were not bristling with weapons. The protrusions that he had mistaken for cannon emplacements were actually sensor arrays, communication dishes, docking ports for smaller, shuttle-like craft. The imposing silhouettes were not designed for intimidation, but for protection. They were self-contained ecosystems, mobile worlds capable of sustaining a population of millions for centuries. They were not instruments of conquest, they were instruments of survival. "We are not a warrior species," Captain Restova said, her voice filled with a profound sadness. "We have fought wars, yes, we have known great violence, but it is not our nature. We are explorers, builders, dreamers. Our dreadnoughts are not meant to inspire fear. They are meant to inspire hope. They are our promise to our children, a promise that we will never again be trapped on a single world at the mercy of a dying star or a foolish leader." Zarthus looked at the images of the human arcs, and he saw not a threat, but a miracle. He saw a species that had faced extinction and had not only survived, but had triumphed. He saw a people who had turned their fear into a source of strength, their desperation into a catalyst for innovation. He saw a civilization that was not just reaching for the stars, but was carrying its entire world with it, a testament to its unwavering commitment to life. "But your power," the Hesperian delegate pulsed, its light a dim, flickering ember. "The energy signatures from your ships, they are immense. They could crack a continent. Why would you need such power for colony ships?" Captain Restova's expression became somber, her eyes seeming to look past the convocation hall into the depths of a dark and troubled history. "Because the universe is not always a welcoming place. We learned that lesson the hard way. We have encountered things in the void, things that are ancient and powerful and hungry." The chamber grew cold. The delegates, who had moments before been so certain of their own power, of their own place in the grand order of the galaxy, were now faced with a terrifying new reality. The universe was not empty. It was not a vast, silent stage upon which they were the only actors. There were other players, older and more powerful than they could possibly imagine. And the humans had met them. "Our dreadnoughts," Captain Restova continued, her voice a low, chilling whisper, "are not weapons in the traditional sense. They are shields. Their power is not meant for destruction, but for deterrence. To unleash their full power, it is something we hope we never have to do, because to do so would be to acknowledge that we have failed, that our dream of a peaceful existence among the stars is nothing more than a childish fantasy." Zarthus looked at the human captain, at her calm, steady gaze, and he finally understood. The humans were not a threat. They were a warning. They were the harbingers of a new age, an age of uncertainty and peril, but also an age of hope. They had come to the Viridian threshold not to conquer, not to destroy, but to seek allies. to find other species who were willing to stand with them against the coming darkness. The revelation settled over the convocation hall like a shroud, a heavy, suffocating weight of truth. The carefully constructed reality of the Cathar Dominion, the illusion of their own supremacy, had been shattered. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were not even the most powerful players on the board. They were children. Children who had been playing in a dark and dangerous forest, oblivious to the predators that lurked in the shadows. Zarthus felt a strange sense of relief. The burden of leadership, the weight of an empire, suddenly seemed insignificant. He was no longer just a Cathar, a high executor of the Dominion. He was a sentient being, a part of a much larger, much more complex cosmic tapestry, and for the first time in his long life he did not feel alone. He looked at Captain Rostova, at this emissary from a young, vibrant, and terrifyingly powerful civilization, and he saw not an enemy, but a kindred spirit. A fellow traveler on the long, dark road of cosmic evolution. He saw a partner, a potential ally in the great, unspoken war against the encroaching darkness. The silence in the chamber was finally broken, not by a voice, but by a gesture. Zarthus, the high executor of the Cathar Dominion, the ruler of 1,000 worlds, slowly, deliberately lowered his head in a sign of respect. It was a gesture that had not been seen in the convocation hall for centuries, a symbol of submission, of acknowledgement of a greater power. And one by one, the other delegates followed suit. The Hesperian's light softened into a gentle, respectful blue. The Zalosian bowed his massive, tree-like head. The scrivener chirped a soft, melodious note of acquiescence. Captain Rostova's faint smile returned, but this time it was not enigmatic. It was warm, genuine, a beacon of light in the dim, cavernous hall. "Thank you," she said simply. "We have much to discuss." The grand, cinematic reveal of humanity's true nature had left the convocation in a state of profound shock and introspection. The long, tense cycles of debate had given way to a quiet, contemplative period of reevaluation. The delegates, once so sure of their place in the universe, were now forced to confront the unsettling truth of their own insignificance. They had been so focused on their own petty squabbles, their own territorial disputes, that they had failed to see the larger, more terrifying picture. The universe was not a benign playground, but a dark and dangerous wilderness, and they had been wandering through it like lost children. Zarthus had spent the days following the humans' arrival in a state of deep meditation, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He had replayed Captain Rostova's words over and over again, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of a hidden agenda. But he could find none. The human's sincerity was palpable. Her sorrow, her weariness, her quiet determination, it was all too real. These were not the words of a conqueror, but of a survivor. A species that had stared into the abyss and had not flinched. He had convened a private council with the leaders of the most powerful species in the Dominion, the Hesperians and the Zalosians. The mood was somber, the usual arrogance and bluster replaced by a heavy, unspoken fear. They had all seen the data that Captain Rostova had shared with them, the sensor logs, the star charts, the fragmented accounts of their encounters with the others. The information was terrifying. It spoke of beings of immense power, of civilizations that were ancient beyond comprehension, of a hunger that was as old as the stars themselves. "They call them the Silentium," the Hisper. Ian Delegate pulsed, its light a sickly, greenish-yellow. "Aptly named. They do not communicate, they do not negotiate. They simply consume. Worlds, stars, entire galaxies, they are a force of cosmic entropy, a cancer that is spreading through the universe." The Hesperian's voice, usually so calm and melodious, was now a discordant, frightened chime. The Zalosian rumbled in agreement, his bark-like skin shifting in agitated patterns. "The humans have encountered them on multiple occasions. They have lost many of their arcs. They have been fighting a holding action for centuries, a desperate, lonely war at the edge of the galaxy, and we were about to attack them. We were about to become another enemy at their backs." The shame in his voice was a tangible thing, a heavy weight that seemed to press down on the entire chamber. Zarthus listened in silence, his mind racing. He had been so blind, so arrogant. He had seen the humans as a threat, a challenge to his authority, but they were not the enemy. They were the first line of defense. They were the sentinels at the gate, holding back a darkness that the Dominion had not even known existed. "They are dreadnoughts," Zarthus said, his voice a low, reverent whisper. "They're colony ships. They are not just arcs, they are fortresses. Their power is not for offense, but for a final, desperate act of defiance." He had seen the schematics, the theoretical models of what would happen if one of the human ships were to unleash its full power. It was not a weapon, it was a self-destruct mechanism of unimaginable scale. A single ship could create a supernova, a cleansing fire that would sterilize an entire solar system, taking the silentium with it. It was a scorched earth policy on a cosmic scale, a testament to the humans' absolute refusal to be consumed. They are magnificent, the Hesperian pulsed, its light now a soft, admiring lavender. To have faced such a foe, to have suffered such losses, and yet to still have hope, to still be reaching out, seeking allies, it is a level of courage that I cannot comprehend. And what of us? The Zalosian asked, his voice a low, mournful growl. What can we do? Our fleets, our weapons, they are like children's toys compared to the power of the silentium. We would be nothing more than a momentary distraction. Perhaps, Zarthus said, his gaze fixed on the swirling nebulae outside the observation portal. Or perhaps we can be more. The humans have something that we do not. They have a different way of seeing the universe. They have unlocked secrets that we have never even dreamed of. They communicated with the Void Sentinels. They have a connection to the fundamental forces of the cosmos that we lack. Perhaps they can teach us. It was a radical idea, a complete reversal of the Cathar's long-held belief in their own superiority. But Zarthus knew that it was the only way. The old ways were no longer enough. The Dominion, with all its power and all its history, was not equipped to face this new threat. They needed to change, to evolve, to learn from the very species they had once dismissed as primitives. He had requested another audience with Captain Rostova, this time in a smaller, more intimate setting. He wanted to speak to her not as a high executor, but as an equal. He wanted to understand the human spirit, to learn the source of their incredible resilience. She had agreed without hesitation, and now, as he sat across from her in his private observatory, the light of a distant star illuminating her calm, intelligent face, he felt a sense of peace. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was no longer overwhelming. It was manageable. "We have reviewed the data you provided," Zarthus began, his voice devoid of its usual booming authority. "It is sobering. We were unaware." Captain Rostova nodded, her expression one of understanding. "We know. It is not a truth that is easily accepted. We struggled with it ourselves for a long time. It is a heavy burden to bear." "You have borne it alone for too long," Zarthus said, his words a solemn vow. "The Cathar Dominion, we wish to offer our assistance. Our fleets, our resources, they are at your disposal." A faint, sad smile touched Captain Rostova's lips. "We appreciate the offer, High Executor, and we will gladly accept it. We need all the allies we can get. But it is not your fleets that we need most. It is your knowledge, your history, your understanding of this galaxy." Zarthus was taken aback. "Our knowledge? But you have demonstrated a level of technological and metaphysical understanding that is far beyond our own." "We have developed certain specializations," Captain Rostova said, her choice of words deliberate and precise. "Out of necessity, but we are still a young species. We are newcomers to this cosmic stage. You have been here for millennia, you have in the rise and fall of empires. You have explored the far reaches of this galaxy. You have a wisdom that we lack." She leaned forward, her eyes filled with a new, intense light. "The silentium, they are not just a physical threat. They are a spiritual one. They consume not just matter, but hope. They are the embodiment of despair, of the universe's inevitable slide into heat, death, and oblivion. To fight them, we need more than just weapons. We need a reason to fight, a belief in something greater than ourselves." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the star-dusted expanse outside the observatory. "We have seen things that would break the spirit of a lesser species. We have seen entire civilizations extinguished in the blink of an eye. We have seen the end of worlds, and yet we have also seen moments of incredible beauty, of profound connection. We have seen life emerge from the most unlikely of places. We have seen evidence of a purpose, a design, a consciousness that permeates the very fabric of reality." Zarthus listened, mesmerized. The human was not just a soldier, not just a diplomat. She was a philosopher, a mystic. She was speaking of things that the Cathar had long ago dismissed as primitive superstition. And yet in her voice he heard the ring of truth. "The progenitors," he said, the word a soft, hesitant whisper. "The ancient beings who built the Void Sentinels. We have always believed them to be long dead, a forgotten chapter in the history of the galaxy." "They are not dead," Captain Rostova said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. They have moved on. They have ascended to a higher plane of existence. but they left behind echoes of themselves, clues, a breadcrumb trail for those who were willing to follow. She gestured to the star charts that were projected onto the observatory's main screen. A complex, intricate pattern of stars was highlighted, a pattern that Zarthus had never seen before. We have been following that trail for centuries. It has led us to some of the oldest, most mysterious places in the galaxy, and it is leading us to the source of the Silentium, to the heart of the darkness. Zarthus looked at the star chart at the impossibly distant point of light that was their destination, and he felt a shiver run through his carapace. It was a journey into the unknown, a voyage into the heart of a cosmic nightmare. And yet, he also felt a sense of excitement, a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a ruler, an administrator. He was an explorer, a pioneer, a partner in the greatest adventure in the history of the galaxy. "There is something else," Captain Rostova said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Something we found in the oldest of the progenitor ruins, a message, not for us, not for any of the younger races. It was a response, a reply to a signal that was sent from outside our galaxy." The implications of her words were staggering. The progenitors, the most ancient and powerful beings in their galaxy's history, had been in communication with something else, something from beyond the veil of their own cosmic island. The message was a warning, Captain Rostova continued, her voice heavy with the weight of the ancient secret. It spoke of a greater threat, a threat that makes the Silentium seem like a minor annoyance, a threat that is coming for all of us. Zarthus felt his mind reeling, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling into dust. The Silentium, the progenitors, the message from another galaxy, it was all too much to comprehend. He felt like a primitive, a savage who had just been shown the true, terrifying scope of the universe. And yet he was not afraid. He was humbled. He was filled with a sense of awe. He was a part of something vast, something ancient, something that was beyond the comprehension of any single species. He was a part of a story that had been unfolding for eons, a story of struggle, of survival, of hope. He looked at Captain Rostova, at this emissary from a species that had been forged in the crucible of unimaginable suffering, and he saw not a primitive, but a teacher, a guide, a friend. "We will go with you," he said, his voice filled with a new, unwavering resolve. "The Cathar Dominion will stand with humanity. We will face this darkness together." Captain Rostova's smile was no longer sad, no longer enigmatic. It was a beacon, a supernova of hope in the vast, terrifying darkness of the unknown. "We were hoping you would say that," she said, and in her eyes Zarthus saw the reflection of a billion stars, a testament to the enduring power of life, of consciousness, of the unbreakable spirit of a species that had refused to be broken. The journey would be long, the odds insurmountable, but for the first time in the history of Galaxy, they would not be facing the darkness alone. They would be facing it as one. The combined fleets of the Dominion and the human flotilla, a sight that would have been unimaginable just cycles ago, moved in silent, majestic procession through the void. The sleek, organic curves of the Cathar warships flew alongside the massive, brutally functional forms of the human orcs, a testament to the new, fragile alliance that had been forged in the crucible of a shared, existential threat. The Veridian threshold, once a symbol of division and conflict, was now the staging ground for an unprecedented joint expedition into the unknown. Zarthus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable Will, and watched the combined fleet on the main view screen. The sight stirred a strange mix of emotions within him, pride, anxiety, and a profound sense of destiny. He had spent his entire life defending the borders of the Dominion, protecting his people from the perceived threats of the outside galaxy. And now he was leading them into the very heart of that darkness, into a conflict that was far beyond the scope of anything his ancestors could have ever imagined. He had spent countless hours in conversation with Captain Rostova, sharing knowledge, comparing histories, piecing together the fragmented puzzle of the progenitors and their ancient war with the Silentium. He had learned more about the true nature of the universe in the past few cycles than he had in all his centuries of life. He had learned of the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy, of the countless civilizations that had risen and fallen, of the deep, cosmic currents that shaped the flow of history. And he had learned of the anomaly. It was the human's name for the source of the Silentium, the point in spacetime from which the all-consuming plague seemed to originate. It was a region of nothingness, a hole in the fabric of reality, a place where the laws of physics ceased to function. It was a wound in the universe, and it was bleeding darkness. "We are approaching the outer coordinates of the anomaly," a calm, synthesized voice announced from the bridge's main console. "Estimated time to arrival, 1 cycle." A ripple of tension went through the bridge crew. The Cathar were a disciplined, stoic people, but even they could not completely suppress the primal fear of the unknown. They had all seen the human data logs, the terrifying images of worlds that had been consumed, stripped bare of all life, all matter, all hope. Zarthus looked over at the command chair that had been installed for Captain Rostova. She was a constant presence on his bridge now, a symbol of the new alliance. She sat with her usual calm composure, her eyes fixed on the viewscreen, her expression unreadable. She had been to the edge of the anomaly before. She had seen its horrors firsthand. She had lost friends, comrades, and yet she showed no fear, only a grim, unwavering determination. "All ships report status," Zarthus commanded, his voice a steady, reassuring presence in the tense silence. Reports began to flood in from across the fleet, a chorus of calm, professional voices. The human ships, with their strange, almost organic-sounding systems, reported full power to their reality anchors. It was a technology that Zarthus still did not fully comprehend, a way of reinforcing the local fabric of spacetime, of creating a small pocket of stability in the chaos of the anomaly. It was another example of humanity's, their unique and terrifying ingenuity. The Cathar ships, with their more conventional but still powerful energy shields and weapon systems, reported full readiness. They were the muscle of the fleet, the raw power that would be needed to hold back the tide of the Silentium if it came to that. But Zarthus knew that this was not a battle that could be won with brute force. It was a battle of will, of spirit. As they drew closer to the anomaly, the very nature of space began to change. The stars on the viewscreen began to warp, to twist and distort as if seen through a flawed lens. The ship's sensors began to report impossible readings, paradoxes of time and space that should not exist. The fabric of reality was unraveling. A low, keening sound began to fill the bridge, a psychic hum that seemed to bypass the ship's auditory systems and resonate directly in the minds of the crew. It was a sound of despair, of utter, absolute hopelessness. It was the song of the Silentium, the death knell of the universe. Zarthus felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a cold, creeping dread that threatened to consume him. He saw images in his mind, flashes of a dark, empty future, of a universe devoid of life, of light, of meaning. He saw the end of everything. He looked over at Captain Rostova. Her eyes were closed, her face a mask of concentration. She was fighting it, pushing back against the psychic onslaught with the force of her own will. He could feel her hope, her unwavering belief in the future. It was a small, fragile flame in the face of an all-consuming darkness, but it was there, and it was enough. He drew strength from her quiet, indomitable spirit. He focused his own mind, his own will, pushing back against the tide of despair. He thought of his people, of his history, of the long, unbroken chain of life that had led to this moment. He would not let it end here. He would not let the darkness win. The keening sound on the bridge intensified, and the viewscreen suddenly went black. A collective gasp went through the crew. They were blind, adrift in a sea of nothingness. "The anomaly it is larger than we anticipated," Captain Rostova said, her voice strained but still steady. It is adapting, it is learning." "What do we do?" Zarthus asked, his voice a low, urgent whisper. We do what we came here to do," she said. We find the source, we find the heart of the darkness, and we shine a light on it." She opened her eyes, and Zarthus was stunned by what he saw. They were no longer the deep, unfathomable blue he had come to know. They were glowing. A brilliant, radiant white light that seemed to push back the encroaching darkness, to fill the bridge with a warm, comforting glow. "The progenitors, they did not just leave us a map," she said, her voice now a chorus of 1,000 voices, a symphony of hope and determination. "They left us a key, a way to reignite the fire of creation, to heal the wound in the universe." She raised her hand, and a small, intricate device materialized in her palm. It was a sphere of pure, crystalline energy, pulsating with a soft, gentle light. It was a progenitor artifact, one of the many that the humans had found on their long, lonely journey. "This is a seed," she said. "A seed of a new universe, a new beginning." Zarthus stared at the device, his mind struggling to comprehend the scale of what she was proposing. To create a new universe. The idea was, it was beyond blasphemy. It was divine. But to do so, it would mean the end of this one, he said, his voice trembling. Yes, she said, her expression a mixture of profound sadness and fierce determination. It is a terrible choice, but it is the only one we have. This universe it is dying. The silentium, they are not a disease, they are a symptom of a much deeper, much more fundamental decay. We cannot save it. We can only start over. She looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with an unspoken question. It was a question that would decide the fate of not just their two species, but of every living thing in the galaxy. It was a question that would echo through the annals of history for all time. Zarthus looked at the faces of his crew, at their fear, their confusion, their dawning understanding. He looked at the blackness on the view screen, at the all-consuming void that threatened to swallow them whole. And he thought of the future, of the generations yet to come, of the new worlds, the new life, the new hope that could be born from the ashes of the old. He thought of the humans, of their incredible courage, their unwavering resilience, their infinite capacity for hope. They had faced the end of their world and they had not despaired. They had built a new one. They had carried the fire of life across the void and they had offered to share it with him. He made his decision. He nodded a slow, solemn gesture of acceptance. "Do it," he said, his voice filled with a new, unshakable conviction. Captain Rostova smiled, a brilliant, radiant smile that seemed to light up the entire universe. "Thank you," she said. She closed her hand around the crystalline sphere, and a wave of pure, white energy erupted from her, washing over the bridge, over the ship, over the entire fleet. It was a wave of creation, of life, of hope. The darkness on the view screen receded, replaced by a swirling, chaotic maelstrom of light and color. They were inside the anomaly, at the very heart of creation. And in the center of it all, Zarthus saw a single point of light, a spark, a new Big Bang, a new universe being born. He looked at Captain Rostova, but she was no longer there. She had become one with the light. She had sacrificed herself, her entire being, to give the universe a new beginning. She had become a star, a beacon of hope for all the new life that was to come. Zarthus felt a single, hot tear roll down his cheek, a sensation he had not experienced since he was a child. It was a tear of sorrow, of loss, but also of gratitude, of awe. He looked at the new universe being born on the view screen, at the infinite possibilities that lay before them, and he knew that the sacrifice of Captain Eva Rostova of the human species would never be forgotten. They would be the legends, the myths, the gods of this new universe. They would be the ones who had stared into the abyss and had not flinched, the ones who had carried the fire of life through the darkness, the ones who had given them all a second chance. And as the light of the new creation washed over him, filling him with a sense of peace and purpose that he had never known before, Zarthus, the last high executor of the Cathar Dominion, made a silent vow. He would not let their sacrifice be in vain. He would guide his people and all the other surviving species of the old universe into this new dawn. He would teach them the lessons that the humans had taught him, the lessons of courage, of resilience, of hope. The age of the Cathar was over. The age of the Dominion was over. A new age was beginning, an age of unity, of exploration, of humanity. And Zarthus, the humble student of a species that he had once called primitive, was ready to begin. The universe was vast and dark and full of terrors, but it was also full of wonders, and for the first time in a very, very long time, he was not afraid. He was home.